Hello everyone, it is so good to see you. Pardon the lower tone and energy for this one in particular. I caught a bit of a bug, which is no pun intended. I didn't even realize that until I said it. But this one in particular will be just a little bit more down to earth in energy. So I still wanted to talk about Silksong and my experience with it. I recently finished Silksong just about a month after the game came out, which is kind of amazing considering how many titles came out in September and everything I'm trying to juggle at the same time. But getting straight into it, there were a lot of people who thought after completing Act 2 that that was the end. You know, they roll credits, you see your completion time, you're all happy and good, and you can move on, right? Well, if you play the original Hollow Knights, you know that by the end of credits, that's not the end. The ending is a little bit vague and incomplete, and you have more questions than answers. The exact same thing happens in Silksong. We're not going to spoil anything here in particular, except for the fact that there is more after the Act 2 portion. So if that's something that you don't want to hear about, I guess you can wait until you're done with that game, or at least reach that portion to continue. But like many games in this genre, I knew that this wasn't like the actual ending, and so once I rolled credits, I went back in and I started to just explore around and look for places that I hadn't been to previously. I wanted to finish a lot of the quests that were there, find some more of the fleas, find more tools and weapons and upgrades and whatnot, as you usually would with a Metroidvania. But I started going all over Farloom, trying to figure out who I hadn't talked to, where I hadn't been before, what quests I hadn't done, and it took me a long time to figure out how to actually trigger the next part, because I had to look it up. So if you want to proceed to the actual end of the game, you need to do all the quests in the 3 main locations of Bone Bottom, Bellheart, and Songclave, I believe. You have to find all the fleas that are out there, which is not very easy to do. It's kind of like finding all of the grubs in the original game. But there is an NPC in the world that you can find, and then they'll go join the flea caravan, and then they'll tell you where the rest of the fleas are so you can complete that prerequisite as well. But once you complete all of the above, you will find one more wish to complete, and that leads you to Act 3 of Silksong. Once you start exploring Act 3, that's when you realize this is not the end game. There is more. So this is kind of a weird comparison, but I kind of related to the very end of Final Fantasy VII for the PS1. When you reach the final disc, you can either go to the end game and complete it by beating the final boss, or you can explore the rest of the world and see things that have changed. I kind of thought that's what this was going to be. Either I'm free to fight the true final boss now, or explore the rest of Farloom and collect everything else that I hadn't already gotten. But no, you can't go straight to the end. There are more quests and more objectives to do. And it was somewhere in between all of this running around, completing fetch quests, getting stuck on bosses again, when I realized I felt like I was done with this game. Exploring the world in Act 3 really makes you realize why this game took 7 years to make. There's more quests, people to find, places to explore. I kept finding new areas that I'd never seen for new powers or tools. On one hand, this turns Farloom into a complete and realized world. Nearly everybody's story wraps up somehow with no lingering silk threads. That's a good thing. What hit me was the final completion time. 56 hours and 10 minutes to complete Act 3. Mind you, this is me very meticulously traveling around everywhere, doing most quests and events that I felt were worth doing. And that's the thing. I didn't want to miss out on most of these lingering story bits or potential drops of lore that might connect to the original Hollow Knight, but boy did I want it to end. The biggest whiplash that I felt was the way that the game sets you up to finish pretty much everything by the end of Act 2 to reach Act 3. You completed all the wishes, you found all the fleas, but now you have more quests to do, bosses to fight, MacGuffins to find, and it's not any easier. I think Hollow Knight Silksong might have been made with too much content. I fully realize that I shouldn't be complaining about there being more of a good game to play. A Silksong is excellent after all, but there's also a point where a game overstays its welcome. I have never played a game in this genre that felt this long and this packed with content. King Cherry said, "You want to play Silksong? Have all the Silksong you could ever ask for." And I don't know how good or practical that really is. In case you didn't know, this little 50+ hour indie title is only worth $20 US. The more that I played this game, the more absurd that this seemed. You want to know what else is commonly $20 US out there? A lot of DLC add-ons. And the irony is that this game was originally supposed to be DLC to begin with. Obviously, it's not fair to compare different games and genres, but when this kind of game is $20, people start talking about the value of said game, the time that went into it, and how much content people can get out of it. I asked people how much they would have paid for Silksong, and most on average would have gladly paid twice as much, at least. In my opinion, this is a full-price game, but because we have this precedence, the greater audience believes that an indie title should be about half the price of a non-indie game, if not less. But a lot of people who finish Silksong will likely think that's crazy. The original Hollow Knight released for $15, so they did sell the sequel for more. I just wonder if they sold it for enough. At face value, a cheaper cost is beneficial to us, the consumer, but it feels like this sends a message as to what's an acceptable price for a game today. We're buying remakes and remasters for twice this amount or more. Some of these are very well done, others people are underwhelmed by. This, of course, is a person-to-person case. One remake that I really enjoy you might consider to be a waste of time, or one that you already own the original for. The topic of remakes are an entirely different discussion. You can watch John's most recent video after this one if you want more insight on the matter. After it all, I feel as though this team could have spent less time on Silksong to make a more compact, concise game, sell it at this price, or even a little more still, and move on to a new project. Now, I'm never going to discourage creativity. They had a vision and ideas, a lot of ideas, and according to them, they were happily working on the game without any crunch or need to rush. It is a very organically made game, and that's good. But 7 years to make a game is a lot. And that's not to say that this wasn't a success either. It sold over 6 million in the first month. Compare that to Metroid Dread, for example, a full-price game that sold only half of that as of today. Was it the price? The brand recognition? Multi-platform availability? The infamy and meme quality of Silksong? I don't know, but this one indie title already sold twice as much as the best-selling game in the Metroid franchise, the series that helped establish the fan term Metroidvania itself. I think that should say something to people. I consider myself a big fan of the Metroidvania search action genre. Earlier this year, I played what I feel is one of my favorites in said genre, Ender Magnolia. It is a sequel to Ender Lilies, and in my opinion, improves on the original in nearly every aspect. Tight gameplay, an interesting story and characters, a large world map, all the hallmarks of a great title. It's even coincidentally parallel to Silksong in some ways, like how the main character is mute in the first game, and the new protagonist in the sequel can speak. This title is $25, and I feel it is the perfect price for what you get out of it. Might be on sale for a little less, even better. I spent about 30 hours on this game completing everything, and I felt I had a full and complete experience from it. The world was big, but it didn't feel so big that it felt like a chore going from place to place. This is getting more into the finer details of Silksong, but man, that place is huge. And while there's fast travel, it can still be a pain to go from one place to another. The areas are sprawling, and that's because Hornet herself is very fast. Hollow Knight feels like a leisurely jog now. The knight doesn't run very fast, and so areas are made smaller and more compact to compensate for this. Battles are also a lot more gradual in pace. You can do quick dashes, double jumps, and pogo hits, sure, but that's sort of the limit in your agility. Hornet can dash, it becomes second nature to us, and a lot of the game builds around that in exploration and in battle. She is very swift and agile, so the biomes are made not just bigger, but also more tricky to platform over because she has so many more options by mid-game. That is where the difficulty spikes come in. You have an expansive kit for movement and attacks, from crests to tools, so the bosses have to change it up too. Because your kit is capable of doing more, the game expects more. And by the end of the game, I was getting tired with how much more the game was asking of me. Just when I think I'm done, I'm asked to collect 3 more things across the world. Side quests pop up along the way, I feel my desire to get more health so I stop dying so much. For those with all the time in the world, this is a perfect loop. But I don't think a lot of us have that kind of time, especially with our ever-growing backlogs. I feel like I'm lucky to have finished this game within a month at all. This is just a very long-winded way of me saying that I wish there were more shorter games for me to play. It really sucks when you're a fan of certain genres like JRPGs where they can all take upwards of 60 hours to beat. Not all of us have that kind of time. I would like to play more. I feel like I barely had time to play Persona 3 Reload or Tales of Grace's F when I also want to get into the Yakuza series, which I heard also would take 60 plus hours per game to get through. I am playing Trails in the Sky as we speak, and it's been lovely. I expect a game like that to be about 60 hours at a glance, given what I've also heard before. The original Hollow Knight is, what, 25 hours or so to reach an end on average? I assume a lot of us expected a similar runtime, so we didn't question the price at first. And in hindsight, if they charged a lot more, we might not have dove in, especially if they didn't want to reveal just how much content was in Silksong. It's a difficult, delicate balance that's not always easy to judge, especially with how volatile the market is today. Gaming is not a cheap hobby, and at the end of the day, we should be thankful that we can have such massive experiences for $20. I don't want to make it sound like I'm telling devs that they're wasting their time by bloating their game, or that they mispriced their title. I don't know game developments. I'm just someone who enjoys talking about them. Silksong is a massive success, and I would say that it absolutely lives up to the hype. There were nearly insurmountable expectations for this game after 7 years, and I think it met and exceeded those. Because when you get to that last act and you look at the world and you realize how much more there is to do, you'll be like, wow. So this is one of the reasons why it took so long. We're going to be talking about Silksong for a long time to come. There is so much care and effort put into this game. I play this mostly with earbuds on, and the sound design itself is mind-blowing. From the reverb, the steps, the gross crawling insect sounds, to swinging your needle on a bell and hearing that very satisfying tinny sound. It's amazing. Indie devs are amazing. Given you have the resources, no matter how small your team is, you can compose, draw, and bring to life incredible works of art. But what do you think? Would you have spent more on Silksong if it was twice the price or more? I'd like to know down below, and also who your favorite boss is. It could be one that you enjoyed, someone that you felt particularly proud of beating, or just one that stood out to you. For me, I'd have to say Trobio. You ever fight somebody that kills you because they rizzed you too hard? That's Trobio, a true actor. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourselves. Till we meet again,